Hello, I'm Lauren Haldeman, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Nutrition Education and Behavior, where we are advancing research, policy, and practice. Each month, we select an article to feature as a press release with an accompanying podcast. And today's podcast article can be read in full at www.jneb.org for free for the next 3 months. And today, I'm really happy to be speaking with Dr. Ginnefer Cox, who is the corresponding author for the article titled Sensory Informed Evaluation Method for Use with Peer Educators of Nutrition Education Programs. I'm glad to have you with us here today, Ginnefer.
Lauren, thanks so much for having me here today and share this exciting research.
Sure thing. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am an assistant professor in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. My research focuses on utilizing sensory evaluation methods to examine the acceptability and perception of recipes and food products that are nutrient dense. And the point of this is to ultimately increase consumer acceptance and consumption of nutritious recipes and food products, thereby improving health behaviors and outcomes. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase, taste is king. That's a pretty common phrase. Given that taste is more important than nutrition when it comes to food choices, it's imperative that recipes that are used to promote better health outcomes among consumers have a high degree of consumer acceptability. And sensory evaluation is the only means to assess this acceptability. I am a classically trained sensory scientist. My PhD is in food science with a sensory science concentration. And when we generally think about sensory evaluation, it's traditionally conducted in lab settings that use individual booths for testing, and that way you can better control your testing variables. But my background as a registered dietitian and in the culinary arts has provided me with what I think is a wonderful skill set to conduct sensory evaluation within non-traditional community-based systems. My research team at the University of Georgia has had the opportunity to collaborate with the University of Georgia SNAP Ed and FNEP programs. And you know those programs provide nutrition education programming to limited resource consumers. A significant part of that nutrition education programming piece is recipe demonstrations. And I always tell people the point of showcasing recipes, especially nutritious recipes, is the hope that people will incorporate these recipes into their normal culinary repertoire. And we have to remember, if healthy recipes and food products are not consumed, they offer no nutritional value. And a key component of consumers, especially limited resource consumers, incorporating healthy recipes into their diet is through sensory evaluation. We have to ask these consumers if they even like the recipe provided to them. And if they don't like the recipe, what are those attributes that are impacting the liking of the recipe? Is it the taste, the saltiness, the sweetness? Is it the flavor? Is it the texture? Is it that an ingredient is difficult to access at a grocery store? By addressing these sensory attributes, we can assist in developing healthy recipes that are more acceptable and thereby consumed. In terms of conducting sensory evaluation in non-traditional community settings, there's some really wonderful and beneficial aspects. A key piece is addressing equity issues and participation. By bringing the science to the community, we can increase representation of the target population in terms of research that's designed to improve the health behaviors of these particular groups. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
That is awesome. I love how you say bringing science to the community, and I love the whole focus on people's acceptance of recipes. You're right. If you're not eating it, there's no nutritional value, correct?
That's right? Correct.
Well, super. So can you tell us a little bit about the paper that's the focus of the podcast today?
So the paper, which is entitled Sensory Informed Evaluation Method for Use with Peer Educators of Nutrition Education Programs, we had a twofold objective with this study. We wanted to determine acceptance of some of the new and unfamiliar recipes that are being implemented for the Food Talk Nutrition Education curriculum for UGA, SNAP Ed, and FNEP. We also wanted to investigate the practicability of a hybrid, meaning remote and in-office method of evaluating these recipes. So in a previous study, we conducted sensory evaluation for 7 newly developed recipes for use with the UGA, SNAP Ed, and FNEP Food Talk programs. And this was conducted among SNAP Ed and FNEP participants. We did this through central location testing. And based on the sensory evaluation for these recipes were modified. So it served the point of showcasing the importance of sensory evaluation. And so now that these recipes were modified based on input from the participants, we wanted to obtain some insights from peer educators from UGA, FNEP, and SNAP Ed programs. And not only with UGA, SNAP Ed, and FNEP, but on a national level, we know that peer educators are utilized heavily for community nutrition programming. And because of their close relationships with the target audience and their involvement with conducting recipe demonstrations, these peer educators are key stakeholders in the recipe development process. They come commonly from the communities that they serve, and therefore they have a level of trust among the audience that they teach. These peer educators, they teach the nutrition curricula, they demonstrate the recipes, and they build a wonderful rapport with their participants. So as such, they're vital in terms of this community nutrition programming. So for this study, we did a hybrid home use test method, and we utilized that to evaluate 8 recipes. Now I said 7 were newly developed recipes for the Food Talk program, and we had 1 existing recipe that was also modified. And we did this home use test method for the peer educators. And these recipes, the key component is that these recipes were to be evaluated before preparing and tasting the recipe and after preparing and tasting the recipe. So with something like central location testing, you have more participants at a central location, such as a community site. We conducted the home use test method because the sample size was smaller with the peer educators, and we were in the time of COVID. Okay, and so doing the home use test method minimized interaction and thereby minimized exposure to COVID. Because as you know, with COVID, a lot of us, especially in community engaged research, we wanted to keep going. We had to keep going because this work is so important, but we also had to shift. And why do we call this a hybrid home use test method? Well, the procedure consisted of the peer educators completing a pre-survey, and that pre-survey looked at overall liking of the recipes prior to preparation and testing. And then they did a post-survey about overall liking of the recipes after preparing them and tasting them. Now, the pre-survey could be conducted outside of the office setting because it was online. With the preparation and testing with the post-survey, what they usually did was conducted in their office setting. And again, it was limited interaction. So these recipes weren't familiar to the peer educators. The recipes included creamy banana overnight oats, vegetarian tacos, homemade salsa, rustic rotini with tomatoes and beans, whole wheat berry bake, chicken chili with white beans, and kale and orange salad. These all sound delicious. I'm actually getting hungry now. We collected the perceived measures of recipe acceptability and then the post survey after they actually tasted it. So for that pre-survey, we did provide them with recipe information. And we also provided them with a recipe photo. We provided them with a step-by-step recipe video. So we asked about perceived acceptability of the recipe, perceived overall liking of the recipe's title, perceived liking of appearance, flavor, texture. And then we did the same with the post survey after they prepared and actually tasted the recipe. We asked about overall liking. All of this was conducted utilizing a 9-point hedonic scale. And that's the industry standard for consumer testing when it comes to sensory evaluation of food products. And actually, in terms of overall liking on that 9-point hedonic scale, where 1 is dislike extremely, 5 is neither like nor dislike, and 9 is like extremely, the industry standard for acceptability hovers at a 7. Okay, so when we did the pre-survey recipe acceptability, the majority of the recipes received past a 7 out of 9 for perceived overall liking. So that was a good thing, and we got some wonderful feedback about some of these recipes. When we did the post-survey recipe acceptability, there was no significant differences in terms of pre and post survey recipe acceptability, which is a good thing, because what we're saying is this hybrid home use test method can be used. However, when the peer educators did prepare and taste the recipes, even though statistically there was no significant difference between the pre and post surveys, the recipe ratings in terms of overall liking did decline slightly. Okay, recipes including chicken chili, kale and orange salad, rustic rotini, and berry bake hovered around 6.5. Homemade salsa was actually the only recipe that received an overall liking rating of 7.0. Okay, so in terms of actually implementing this remote hybrid home use test method, it's actually very feasible because there were no significant differences. Ultimately, depending on resources, you obviously want your peer educators to prepare the recipes. But as we know, even now, we are sometimes limited with time and resources. And so just by showing these peer educators a recipe card, and a step-by-step recipe video, we can obtain some wonderful, wonderful insights without them actually preparing or tasting the recipe.
Great. Thank you for that great overview. And how impressive for your team to be able to stay as active as you were in this project during a very difficult time where we were out of touch with our communities because of COVID. And another thing that you had said early on in your description, peer educators are critical. They are representative of our communities, and what better way to bring nutrition education to their communities in a way that is appropriate and acceptable and effective. So thank you for that. So I have one question for you. Why is it important for community nutrition professionals who are involved in nutrition education programming to use sensory evaluation methodology or this process that your research group laid out in this paper?
Lauren, I can't begin to tell you how important it is to conduct sensory evaluation. Like I said, traditionally, sensory evaluation is conducted in a booth setting where you have everything that's controlled. However, the negative part of that is that a lot of times you don't get your target group. And so when dealing with limited resource consumers whose health behaviors we want to change, we have to go to them. We can't expect for them to come to a lab or a setting. We have to reach out to them. And I want people to know that sensory evaluation is a science. It's a scientific method. It provides a set of established and validated scales and questions that reduces or minimizes bias. With overall liking, which we really want to highlight in this paper, overall liking is usually asked before specific attributes, because we want to know how much did you like the product, what's your liking. You follow that with the sensory attributes, and that also is the industry standard. Sensory evaluation of recipes within federal nutrition education program is essential. You want limited resource consumers to consume these recipes, but you have to ask them if they like it. What about it do you like? What about it do you not like? people want to provide their input. And this allows individuals to provide their input and also serves as a rationale, a justification for modifying an existing recipe or eliminating a recipe. And sometimes it could be just as simple as a substitution with Greek yogurt versus non-fat plain yogurt. Maybe something needs more pepper. Maybe something needs a little more lime juice or lemon juice. And you get that input from the participants and you can modify or eliminate the recipe. Not only just with limited resource consumers, we're talking about different school settings, incorporating new recipes, getting the input of the participants is absolutely essential. School food service, or if you're conducting some kind of in-person or online cooking class, I would highly encourage that sensory evaluation methods be utilized so you can get the input, and that way, again, you have a justification for why a recipe should be modified or even eliminated.
I agree. That was wonderful. Thanks very much, Ginnefer. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I want to say a very special thank you to a very special group of people. First of all, my stellar doctoral student, Dr. Melanie Ng, who spearheaded this research during the time of COVID, which wasn't easy, but we were so passionate about it and we knew it had to be done. And she did such an outstanding job. I'm so proud of her. Also want to say thank you to the co-authors, Dr. Kaushik Adhikari, Dr. Elizabeth Andress, Dr. Sarah Hennis, and Dr. John-Sung Lee. Also, last but never least, thank you so much to the SNAP Ed and FNEP peer educators in the state of Georgia who did the work and made the research happen. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so grateful, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. And to all of our listeners, remember, you can read this article in full at www.jneb.org for free for the next 3 months.